basis. Look at NAFTA. Okay, 20th anniversary of NAFTA. There were 3 challenges with NAFTA that were left undone: immigration, environmental standards, collective bargaining. We were assured 20 years ago that we would come back and revisit these issues. It's been 20 years. If we're going to do something, you better do it right the first time, because you're not going to get a second bite at the apple. Okay? Again, look at my neighbors, friends and family that are struggling to survive. We cannot afford to lose more American jobs. These trade deals have to be fair for middle-class America. Where that step, that magical step in our socio-economic system, which is the middle class, is challenged and disappearing in America.
Thank you.
Fair trade has to be trade for American workers.
Again, Doctor, thank you very, very much for the question. I think all of us up here pretty much agree with each other that if there's going to be a global trade agreement, it has to be fair to American workers. And there's a very, very important reason for that. Our economy is a consumer-based economy, quite deliberately. A consumer-based economy means we don't have to rely on folks outside of this country to keep our economy healthy. Russia, China are going through major economic problems now because they're export-based. But the only way to sustain a consumer-based economy is with robust middle-class jobs. For the vast majority of folks, small slices, as small as we can get it, poor, small slices of the wealthy, and a very robust middle class. You want to talk about security in the United States? That's the single biggest contributor to a secure United States, is a robust middle class where jobs are plenty and able to share a little bit of the American dream. Any trade agreement that provides a pathway to take those jobs offshore and out of here, no. The answer is no. It's now no. It will be no.
Thank you,
absolutely
Senator.
not.
Thank you very much.
What is your position in legalizing marijuana?
George?
I'm in favor of marijuana legalization. The time has come. It's as simple as that, everybody. How much longer are we going to deal with this issue and have people go to jail for possession of marijuana? Hasn't it come? Isn't it time? Say yes with me, please.
Thank you for that question. My legislative career, I worked with the California police chiefs in the medical marijuana industry and coming up with a framework to regulate medical marijuana. We moved the needle, so to speak, tremendously in the state of California. And I've got to say to you that I grew up in a neighborhood with alcoholism, and heroin was the drug of choice. And my concern, looking back at my years of growing up and watching the older kids die of heroin overdoses, is how do we make sure that we keep our young children out of harm's way? I have not taken a position yet on on the legalization of marijuana yet. I want to see what these initiatives look like. But I'll tell you, when I go in my neighborhoods and I see my young folks drinking and smoking pot and doing that day after day, I have concerns. I have serious concerns with a full legalization of marijuana.
It's one of the great questions that our society faces today. But every generation has the right to have laws that reflect their values. My generation has had that opportunity. I have 2 children, one who's 24, one who's 22. I've watched their friends. They're over at the house when they do the things that teenagers and early 20 kids do. It's part of their life. I can't hold my kids' generation to my standards. This is an evolving issue. So I have to share Lou's view that he expressed, that it's coming. There's no question about that. And under the right proposal that doesn't have the downsides that we've watched with alcohol abuse for decades and generations, we can prevent that. then I think that younger generation has to be given the opportunity to strike the laws they believe are important while they have their own adult lives to live. It's an evolving one. We're all going to have to embrace it. Let's just make sure it's the right way.
Ms. Onofre, I'm for legalization, but how are we going to regulate it? We have to look carefully at Colorado, we have to look carefully at Oregon, and also California. What have we learned before we're able to legalize it for the entire country? How are we going to regulate it? That's really key. There's an underground economy that Colorado had to deal with, even though it was legal. The banks weren't ready for it. Are we ready for it as a country? And how will we work with states to make sure that when we do regulate, that it is done properly so that we can generate revenue and reinvest it in those neighborhoods that have been disenfranchised, that have been overly taken into custody and fed into the prison system? How are we going to reinvest so that we have power and equity in this issue? It's not just about legalization. It's about regulation, it's about taxation, and it's about states and their sovereignty as well. We need to consider all those different issues.
Are you in favor of the U.S. Supreme Court decision to strike down the Voting Rights Act, Section 4 of 1965, because there's no longer any voting rights violation in our country?
That will go to me, Ray? Okay, thank you. David, I'm glad you asked that question.
That goes to Luke.
Oh, that goes to Lou?
Absolutely not. I believe all of us have a fundamental right to vote, and it's just not a matter of showing up the day of elections and voting. You've seen in this country historically that a lot of folks, especially folks of color, those folks that are economically challenged, have been denied the right to vote. Anything we can do as a society to make sure that we encourage, that we give the motivation for folks to vote should be done. We need to make sure that each and every vote in this country is counted and each and every citizen votes. That's why I'm happy what's going on in Sacramento right now, which is automatically almost folks going to be registered to vote. Now we just got to make sure folks realize that their vote counts and they show up to vote on election day. Thank you.
David, I think you're going to get the same answer from all of us. Of course, we don't support that. That's pretty much of a given. You know, I was proud to do an almost 10-year fight to create that new law school at UCI. And we were lucky to recruit a man by the name of Erwin Chemerinsky as its founding dean. And Dean Chemerinsky has recently published a book called The Case Against the Supreme Court. And it goes through the history of that court and incredibly bad decisions made for purely political reasons, sadly, among many good decisions. Citizens United will be ranked as one of the worst. There are others that are even worse, but this will be one of them. And if this decision results in that act, it will also make the list. Because that next president may have 2, 3, maybe more appointments to that United States Supreme Court. And the path it's currently on will continue if the right person is an elected president of the United States.
You know, my parents came from a country where your vote meant nothing. But here, I personally know that every single vote counts. In 1965, protections for voters and the Voting Rights Act, among many civil rights legislations that were passed during that year, during that time, needs to be protected, not taken apart. And that's one of the reasons why we have to reform Washington, because there are attacks constantly on voting rights. You know, in states, they're closing DMV offices where people get driver's license and requiring voter IDs. That is not okay. That is going backwards beyond 1965. We need more people voting and making it easier for people to vote, not making it more difficult. That's why my parents risked their life, the life of their kids and their unborn child, to be in this country, for that freedom, for that democracy. But we need to advance this democracy, not go backwards.
I think we can all agree that that divided decision was an outrage, and that the Voting Rights Act was gutted because of it is just unconscionable. We have had to deal with, from this Supreme Court, Citizens United, countless other decisions, but let us remember one of the key decisions that led us to have this Supreme Court majority, and that's Bush v. Gore. Let us not forget that. We need to make sure that the next President of the United States is a Democrat who will represent all of us in this country, and that we have a Senate and a Congress that will stand up and make sure that good, thoughtful people are put on our bench to dispense justice in the right way, in the just way. And that is what you can count on from me. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We're at the 45-minute mark. We're all going to take a 5-minute recess with the panel over here. The panelists on the questions, please turn your questions over and put them back in the binder. And with that, we'll be back in exactly 5 minutes. Thank you all.
The immigration issue is on the minds of a lot of residents you'll represent and those across the country. Please explain what measures must be taken to ensure a fair solution to the immigration crisis.
Great question. Thank you, Sandy. Our local community here is one of the most diverse and has one of the largest immigrant populations in California. And I'm proud of that. I think we're all proud of that, because it's who we are as Americans. But something has to change, Sandy. There's no question about that. We got to stop the rhetoric. We got to stop talking about it. We have to start doing it. And to President Obama's credit, with DAPA, DACA, those were great steps forward. They're stuck in the court system now. I understand that. It's being addressed, hopefully successfully. But it isn't time for tinkering around the edges again anymore. We have to embrace who we are as a nation and have robust immigration reform. Yes, we have to make sure that it's done rationally, sensibly, doesn't dislodge jobs that are here already. Folks who hold those jobs, we know that. But this is who we are.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Diasny and audience, is my microphone on? Hello, can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
Great. Mrs. Diasny and members of the audience, I'm a proud immigrant, and I know where I come from, and I know where America comes from. If you're not a Native American, you come from another place, and we built this nation together, and together we'll build it into the future. That's why we need comprehensive immigration reform. You know, Washington is not working right now. There are so many attacks on immigrants, and we need that to stop. The 46th Congressional District is a very diverse district, and we need comprehensive immigration reform. We need to stop demonizing and attacking immigrants. And the fact of the matter is, we need immigrants with a pathway to citizenship so we can contribute tax dollars. Social Security, right now, only has 2 workers per beneficiary. We need a lot more than that, at least 5. That's why we need comprehensive immigration reform for everybody, not just for immigrants.
We are a nation of immigrants, and we do need comprehensive immigration reform. And I am very proud in my first 6 months on the City Council that we unanimously approved a resolution to the President and Congress to make sure they move that forward. The Senate passed what was a work-in-progress bill, and the House just stomped on it. What the Republicans did was outrageous. And there are some Republicans in the House that want to move this, but we have got to break them free of the Tea Party and this so-called Freedom Caucus. We can do it together. Elect me, and I will go to Congress, and I will work to get this through. Thank you.
This is a very personal issue to me, obviously, and I have to say that I'm saddened because we talk about the Republicans, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of Democrats do not stand with us in our community when it comes to this issue. That is a fact of the matter. In California, I'm proud to say, we essentially moved ahead with immigration reform. I voted, co-authored, and voted for every one of those measures. Yet when I look at the national scene, we got a guy named Donald Trump, so instead of moving ahead with immigration reform, is calling all the Mexicans, all of us of Mexican heritage, criminals. The fact of the matter, immigration reform is not going to move ahead while we keep getting lip service, and nobody's putting this front and center on the national scene. That is a fact. It's not Republicans, it's Republicans and Democrats. Right now, we have 1 million young American-born citizens growing up in Mexico that have been deported with their families. So you talk about the 1930s when you had 1.5 million Mexicans deported. It's happening right now.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you
We
very much.
need to stop this insanity. Thank you.
What solutions do you propose to address the homeless issue affecting a growing number of our families in this country?
You know, we're facing this issue right here in Orange County as well, and we see it in front of us. You know, what's important here is that we come together and address homelessness and find out what resources are available and bring the services together. We haven't begun to do that yet. We haven't begun to coordinate services. We haven't begun to put services that are available onto 211. So when folks call in need, that all of the services that are available are there for folks that need help. But it's also an issue that needs criminal justice reform as well, with wraparound services and with support to get folks back into society. You know, folks that have paid their time that are now on the streets. But we're also looking at veterans who are homeless. Folks that have fought for the freedom of this country are coming back home and are homeless. We need to work with all local agencies to make sure that we house veterans. Immediate housing is the solution, and that's what we need to support.
I'm very proud of what we are doing in Anaheim with the county and hopefully approving what will be the first 200-bed facility for Orange County. And after we do that, which will hopefully open next year, that will lead other areas of the county to do the same. And we can finally give the homeless and our in-need population the services they need so that we can all be fully productive members of our society. We need a true multi-service center. In fact, we need multiple multi-service centers. With regard to the federal government, we need to reform our housing and urban development funding system so that we can provide that support, so we can provide funding for veterans, for people in mental distress, for refugees. It all works together, and we in the federal government can do that.
That's not on the question.
The homeless population.
What's the question? The immigration issue?
This was about homeless, sir. Thank you.
Homeless population, first of all, it starts with us as a community. I go to city council meetings and I hear people saying the most negative things about the homeless population. They are our veterans, they are our family members with psychological issues, mental health issues, drug and alcohol issues. We've taken a major step in the right direction by creating drug court, homeless court, veterans courts, but it's not enough. We as individuals have to turn around and say, these are our family members, but for the grace of God, there go I. And I'm glad that Anaheim, and thank you Anaheim for doing the right thing, but I believe that we have to integrate our homeless into our communities. We can't just warehouse and segregate them somewhere away. They are our friends and our neighbors, and we have to reach out, provide them those wraparound services, and make sure that we understand that, hey, you know what? They're human beings. And but for the grace of God, there go I.
Right.
Thank you.
Doctor, one of the best or most proud accomplishments that I had while I served in the state senate was to chair the housing committee. The housing advocates that work in Sacramento will tell you it was